Russia says an alleged chemical attack in the Syrian city of Douma has been staged. That came as part of a speech by the country's representative, Vasily Nebenzia, before the UN Security Council.
Following the liberation of Douma from rebel fighters, Russian specialists were sent there, specialists in radiological, chemical, and biological protection, to collect evidence and information. They took soil samples which show the lack of nerve agent and chlorine-containing substances. In interviews, not a single local resident confirmed the chemical attack having taken place. Bodies of people killed by chemical agents have not been found, and medical personnel and residents have no information about their potential burial areas. Therefore, the use of sarin and chlorine has not been confirmed.
And RT's Caleb Morpin has the details of the meeting.
As the 15-member body convened and we had a meeting of the UN Security Council, we heard first from the representative of the Russian Federation. Now, when Nebenzia spoke, he just kind of broke down how the facts just aren't there about this alleged chemical attack in Douma. He talked about how traces of the chemical, they just didn't seem to be there. Furthermore, they could not find a single civilian eyewitness to confirm that the attack happened. They could not find victims in nearby hospitals or any graves or sites of bodies. It just didn't add up. Now, from there, he went on to talk about the fact that anti-government fighters, terrorist groups like al-Nusra and others, there have been occasions in which territory has been liberated from them, and it's been discovered that they are stockpiling chemical weapons and that they have in the past used chemical weapons against the positions of the Syrian government.
You heard the warnings, but you consciously ignored them because they didn't correspond to the doctrinal arrangements of those who sleep and dream about the liquidation of the official government in one more Arab country.
Now, the Russian representative said that Russia would favor the creation of a new independent body to investigate allegations about chemical weapons and their use in Syria. Now, the United Kingdom spoke up in agreement with Russia's call, and furthermore, when the Syrian Arab Republic took the floor, they also spoke up and said that they would favor the creation of an independent body to investigate the use of chemical weapons in Syria. From there, we heard from Nikki Haley, the representative of the United States. She went on to blame the Syrian government for the attack, despite the fact that very little investigation has taken place. She blamed the Syrian government for the attack, and from there she said that the United States intends to respond to this alleged chemical attack, regardless of whether the UN Security Council approves of that or not. She says that the USA intends to take action. Now, her remarks come after Donald Trump said the USA was in the process of making some big decisions regarding the chemical attack in Douma. This is Donald Trump speaking prior to the UN Security Council meeting.
We are studying that situation extremely closely. We are meeting with our military and everybody else, and we'll be making some major decisions over the next 24 to 48 hours.
U.S. military action, is it off the table as of...
Nothing's off the table. Nothing's off the table.
Now, Nebenzia pointed out that when Donald Trump said that nothing was off the table in regards to Syria and action that he might take, these words sound very dangerous. The implications of possible aggressive action from the United States in Syria could be very severe, and that the whole world should be deeply concerned about this kind of rhetoric and this kind of language coming from the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. Later in the meeting, we did hear from the representative of the Syrian Arab Republic, Bashar Jafari, and when he began speaking and dissecting the allegations made against his country, at that point, the U.S. delegation walked out, making a point that they did not acknowledge or respect the Syrian Arab Republic. At this point, many countries are concerned about the possible implications of this situation. So people are worried about the international implications of what could happen as a result of these allegations, and there's clear differences in the UN Security Council about how these allegations should be treated and responded to. It was a very, very tense meeting with a clear level of difference between different countries represented on the Council.
Well, let's discuss those allegations and the implications further with U.S. Army retired General Paul Vallely. Paul, thank you very much indeed for joining us. As I say, lots to analyse here. Let's look with Russia. Their UN ambassador there says no bodies, no trace of chemical weapons, no witnesses found. If the US is sure the attack happened, won't they want to investigate?
Well, I think it's clear it either happened or it did not happen. And if it happened, there has to be proof that it did. And the idea of an investigation team going in, complemented by Russian investigators, several distinguished members, not politicians, of the international community, to be chosen to go in and validate one way or the other. They ought to easily validate the videos that were shown and the date. That can all be done by a technological, what we call a high-tech analysis of that. And so, again, it's either true or it's not true, but someone needs to get to the bottom of it, because the Syrian government, of course, is being blamed for it. And we've heard stories about Al-Qaeda or other rebel groups being able to gather in some of these chemical or biological weapons, specifically sarin gas, but it's obvious it's happened in the past. The question is, this time, who did it?
Well, as we heard there, Syria backs Debenzi's call for the UN to send in the independent experts to Syria to investigate it. But do you think it's actually likely there'll be an independent investigation?
No, and it should not be the United Nations. The United Nations is not very good at obtaining anything of basic information or intelligence that would be worthwhile using. It should be an independent group of selected, perhaps members out of the Arab League, perhaps a member from the United States, from Russia, perhaps one or two European countries, but it should be, I would at least 7 people that are designated to go in there that are not part of the United Nations, not politicians, that can come back and give a rather quick reply and analysis of what actually happened this past week. This is not too difficult to prove if the right people go in and do the investigation, Kate.
Well, let's look also at the wider implications here. Let's look at Donald Trump. He's already met his commanders and says there are a lot of, to use his words, military options. What do you think he's going to do next?
Well, I know what they do in the White House and in our national security chain. They analyze the different options based on what type of action they're looking at, whether it's a threat to the United States or whether it's a situation that happened with one of our allies or the situation in Syria. So they'll come up with a number of options. One may be military. I don't think it will be, though, because President Trump wants to de-escalate what's happening in Syria. And, of course, the most influential over there now is Russia. And I think, again, Putin and Trump talking about some of these things can solve these problems and get to the bottom of it, rather than sparring with each other all the time that the press creates, and also politicians around the world try to create this big dissension between Russia and everybody else. Good minds, smart minds can talk, they can solve problems, and I think, again, I've recommended this for the last year, that we have a second meeting between Trump and Putin. That occur very shortly. It could occur next week. But get to the bottom of it, get the people involved, and let's come up with some solutions to solve that situation.
Well, let's also look at some of the responses within the UN. We were listening to that meeting earlier. A UN spokesperson says the UN cannot independently verify the allegations about the chemical attack. Let's just have a listen to what he said.
The UN itself just as much in the dark as the rest of us, and relying on,
We're not in a position at this point to independently verify the allegations.
Well, at the same time as that was going on, the US was then talking about those military options. I mean, what's your take on the contrast between the two?
Well, again, everybody tries to forecast what President Trump will do, and they never can. You have to only watch what President Trump actually does, not what is reported. So from that standpoint, I think the president will look at this very seriously, because he wants a better relationship with Russia. And of course, he knows full well that Assad over there is supported by Russia right now more than any other country. And so that relationship in some way has got to bring new leadership to Syria that I've recommended. But yeah, the United Nations is not capable of doing these things. So it should be a good team that's selected and agreed upon that can go in there and finally determine where these chemical weapons are, who has them, and then preclude the use of them, because everybody is just sick seeing children and innocent people that are maimed and harmed and wounded by these terrific and very dangerous sarin gas and other type of chemical biological weapons. So we need to bring an end to this, Kate.
Well, I think one of the reasons, Paul, that they talk about the contrast here, and in particular between military options and also the not being able to verify the situation, is because of what happened a year ago. A year ago, Tomahawk missiles were fired at Syria without an investigation into that alleged chemical attack. I mean, that's why people are, presumably, they might expect a military response, but you think not.
Well, no, I don't think it will happen. It should, because sending Tomahawk missiles into populated areas, even though they're very precise and targeted, there's always going to be collateral damage. So piling on and creating more casualties over there is not the answer. The answer is leaders meeting, finding out where those chemical weapons are, making sure that Assad doesn't use them, and if he does, then he's got to be taken out of office by his own people and replaced with a new leadership there. That's the way I would go at it.
And finally, then, on that note, then, Paul, I mean, do you think the UN Security Council can make any difference to the situation in Syria?
No, I don't. Not at all. And having been in Syria several times and understanding it, no, it's going to take the Syrian people, leaders over there working with other people to reinforce the rebuilding of Syria, creating these safe areas in Syria so they can rebuild. This is what we need to do right now, but they cannot in any way have chemical weapons in that country. So the best thing Russia could do is to identify if there are chemical weapons. Let's go with other groups and let's get them out of there and let's find out who's been using them. That's the key. A good investigator can do that.
And on that,
just like a murder, like. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, Paul. I was about to say, on that positive note, then, and that point with an investigation, let's leave it then. Paul Vallely, US Army retired general. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.